G'day, my name is Josh Caratelli. I'm a senior engineer at Gravity Well, a game studio comprised of game development industry veterans, and today we're talking about the Yellow Brick Road, my journey into the video game development industry and insights about it, pathways into the industry and into adjacent industries, and its STEM connection. So like with everything, what I say here today should be taken with a grain of salt. This is based on my experience and my journey so far. And if I say some advice that resonates with you, then that's fantastic. If I say some advice that doesn't resonate with you, then that's okay as well. This talk is designed for both teachers and their students to find out a bit more about the game development industry. So a bit about me. Who am I and why am I giving this talk? Well, I've been making games professionally for almost a decade. I first started with Xbox and PlayStation games, doing sports games such as rugby, cricket and lacrosse. I did a couple of iPhone games, and then I moved to work on Call of Duty for 5 years, where I worked on a wide range of Call of Duty games, from Call of Duty World War II all the way up to Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Now, I wasn't always making games. I loved playing games, even as a student, but I didn't even know making games was a career option, and I really wish that someone years ago had come to me and said, hey, here's a bit of an overview about games and why they're really cool to make. And that's what I hope to do here today. So today we're talking about the game development industry, why I love working in it, the good and the bad, why making games should be a thing we do in the class, and how you can do that with your assignments and your homework. We'll talk about choosing your own pathway, both into the industry and into adjacent industries, and also talk about getting your foot into the door, some tips and tricks if you love to get into the games industry that I can pass on to you. So let's talk about the game development industry, huh? The good, the bad, and the ugly. So when people ask me what's it like to make games for a living, I tell them it's a bit like this, trying to build the train tracks while driving the train. It's a fast-paced and thrilling environment, and hopefully you're going to reach a destination at the end, which is making a game for millions of players to love, share, and enjoy. I love making games because it's the perfect mix of both creative and technical skills. On the technical side, making games is extremely difficult. You solve some really hard computer science and programming and technical problems that you wouldn't really get elsewhere. And on the creative side, it scratches that creative itch. I mean, there's not many industries that you can talk about how we can make an explosion cooler or more fun, or even what shade of green a goblin skin should be as well. So it's a really cool mix of creative and technical skills. The real reason though why I make games is because of the people. I've never found a better mix of both passionate, kind, and creative people in any industry, except for games. I really love working with people the day-to-day, and the people you find in the game development industry, and it's like no other, and that's the reason why I love making games. On the flip side though, because it is such a passionate industry, you tend to work a bit more hours than you would in other industries, and also for lower pay. So there's a bit of a downside, but it's important to share this. So maybe you want to make games as a hobby in your spare time and work a more stable job. I mean, you work at Bunnings for a decent wage with a lot less hours in games as well. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be working in an industry where, for example, I do programming, I could work at a bank and make twice as much, for example. But I don't want to find myself 15 years later where I've made more money, but I've been unhappy with what I've done with my life, and I haven't really brought joy to my life, to my life and other lives as well. So that's an important reason why I stay in the games industry. It's for the people, it's the type of work, and it's because I want to be true to myself. One thing about making games is that it's extremely hard to do, both on the creative side and the technical side. And the reason for that is because games is actually the culmination of so many different things. It's a mixture on the day-to-day of architecture, maths, and science, and stories, and business, and history, and project management, and problem solving, and innovation, and I could go on. It's so much more. It's everything you could ever think of. And that's why it becomes such a difficult thing to do. You're solving so many problems in so many different problem spaces. Because really, making games is just solving difficult and different problems every day until finally you have a finished game at the end of the road. And these problems, again, can range from architecture to maths and physics and science. So the best way to solve these wide range of problems is to have a wide range of solutions. And another benefit of the games industry is you get to work with a wide range of people from all walks of life and all backgrounds. It doesn't matter what gender, race, creed, or religion you're from, you're a game developer if you want to be. By having people from all walks of life, you can come up with some really creative solutions to lots of different problems that you face every day making games. So that's a bit of why I love making games. Let's talk actually about making games, specifically in the classroom and how it relates to STEM. So STEM is just an acronym for science, tech, engineering, and maths. And these are really important skills that you use every day. And I mean every day when making games. And not just for programming too. So for example, as a programmer, for STEM skills, just today, I've used rigid body dynamics, which is physics, some computer science, and a scientific method, making a hypothesis and seeing what changes. For tech, I've done some programming. For engineering, I've done some tech and engineering project management. And for maths, I use imaginary numbers and algebra. Now, STEM skills aren't just for programming. STEM skills, even on the art side, are very prevalent. For example, my coworker who's an animator today actually used more maths than I did. They used 3D rotations, algebra, and trigonometry. On the engineering side, they had to explore some architecture. For tech, they used motion capture and animation software, and for science, they delved really deep into anatomy. And these are STEM skills just for today. Tomorrow might bring something different, but what's going to be consistent and guaranteed is you're going to be using these STEM skills every day. Now, the really cool thing about making games, and especially in the classroom, is it really improves these STEM skills. And I like to use the adage, it kills two birds with one stone. The first being, by making games, you can actually improve your grades. So, as an example, when I was doing physics in high school, even in year 12, I was really struggling with projectile motion. Because we kept getting questions like this: how high can Jack hit the golf ball? And we've seen these questions thousands of times. Even questions such as, how many watermelons can Jack and Jill fit in a car? It's boring, there's really no application, doesn't really, vibe with you, and you're not really learning much by doing these questions over and over again. So my test scores, for example, for physics and projectile motion weren't great. That was until I started coding projectile motion. In order to improve my test scores, I started making Angry Birds, my own version of Angry Birds. And as a result, my scores for projectile motion started going up. My scores for maths started going up. And it was actually really easy to do because it didn't feel like it didn't actually feel like I was doing any homework or assignments. I was just making a game. But in order to actually make projectile motion work in Angry Birds, you have to understand it. And as a result, I had to actually understand and learn projectile motion. And again, my test scores went up and it was fantastic. And for the second sort of bird in that two birds, one stone thing, as I mentioned before, it makes homework less boring. So in PE, in year 9, we had to make an advertisement about drink driving and the dangers of drink driving. Now you could make a video, you could do like a poster or a billboard. What I decided to do was talk to my teacher and go, hey, could I make an animation? And what I did was made this really cool video. It's a whole 2-minute video that goes into the dangers of drink driving and an animation behind it. I actually spent a lot more hours on this than I thought I would, but it didn't feel like homework. It just felt like making something cool. And as a result, I learned a lot more. I improved my STEM skills, my skills also making games, and I had a really good grade from this too because I put so much effort into it that didn't feel like effort. And this applies just to any subject you can think of, even geography. So for example, we're to present in year 9 in year 9, to present information in an interesting way. So for example, which country has the highest population? So what I decided to do was make a geography quiz starring cardboard Chuck Norris. And what you had to do was slide down different ramps into different trampolines and bounce into the correct answer. So in this question of which country had the highest population, you would slide down the red ramp onto the red trampoline and go into the red box which had the Chinese flag, before moving on to the next question. I put so much effort into this. It didn't even feel like a homework assignment, it just felt like fun. I improved my STEM skills, and I got a really good grade from it too. And also, as an added bonus, for people who are playing the game, they retained the information a lot better because people kept playing the game over and over again. It was actually really cool. So we've spoken a bit about your STEM skills and how you can use those in the classroom. Let's talk a bit about pathways, both into the games industry and into adjacent industries. So if you'd love to go into the games industry, there's loads of different roles. Again, it touches everything you can ever think of. So if you're going to do any sort of programming or tech, you become a programmer, and that could relate from doing gameplay programming to make how the game feels, to becoming an engine programmer and doing some really hardcore low-level programming using lots of maths also. If art's more your vibe, you could be a 3D artist or a 2D artist or a concept artist. And you'd even do VFX and make explosions for a living, which is very cool as well. You could become an animator and bring life to the game as well. As a designer, you could make levels and make the play space that players can play in. You become a game designer and give more sort of input in how the game should play in the moment to moment. And even on the production side, you could be a game tester, which is extremely important to make sure the game is bug-free. You could be a project manager or a producer, and you even go and do sound. Being a sound designer is really cool. I wish I was a sound designer, to be honest. Now, you noticed in those roles there's no role for an ideas person. Ideas people don't actually exist. Everybody brings ideas to the game every day. And if you don't trust me, trust my friend Luke. Luke was the ideas guy, quote unquote, for Fruit Ninja. He was a designer on Fruit Ninja. And even he says that ideas are cheap, it's all about the execution. 15 years ago, if you turned around and said, I had $1 billion idea, $1 billion game, it's about slicing fruit, people would laugh at you. It's all about the execution. No one's strictly an ideas person, everyone brings ideas to the table. Now let's talking about working in the games industry, but the really cool thing about making games is that it really improves your STEM skills to work in other industries if you would like down the track. I constantly have people from other industries reaching out so I can to go work in their industry because of the skills I have. Some of those skills could be applied to, say, film and TV. There's a big push at the moment to use what's called virtual production, which is using a game engine to help with sets and backdrops of different films and TV shows. As an example, Star Wars The Mandalorian uses virtual production a lot. The background over there, in that soundstage, is actually a game engine. And on the traditional side for film and TV, you could do animation or motion capture to bring worlds to life, such as Avatar or 3D animated films. You could become a VFX artist and move from green screen into a really cool fantasy world or realistic world. I mean, there's so many VFX artists who work on Marvel films. Just check the credits. And on the production side, you could be a project manager for any one of these film and TV shows. There's never enough of them. On the engineering and construction side, your game development skills are extremely transferable also. You could use computer-aided design to do modeling for civil engineering such as buildings. You could do aeronautical engineering for planes, or even engineering for trains and cars. There's a wide range of skills you can apply your game development STEM skills to. And even more on the engineering side too, you can work on embedded systems, such as rockets and driverless cars. I know so many friends who used to make games for a living who now work with NASA or who work on driverless cars too. And also directly applicable is IT. You could do website and app development and a wide range of programming or design there. And also you could even do things such as cybersecurity, which is a very hot topic these days also. Now, a really cool adjacent industry is actually all of them, which is really funny because your STEM skills from making games are so transferable. As humans, since the dawn of time, we've always learnt best when we're playing. Play is a fundamental part of being human. And as a result, there's a whole industry called serious games, where you make simulation and training for a wide range of industries such as healthcare, construction, farming, spaceflight, defense, and so much more. As an example, that bottom photo with the NASA logo in there, actually my friends Emre and Norman, who used to make games, that now help train astronauts using game software, including virtual reality. There's such a wide range of skills you can transfer to go into different industries and also get your foot in the door within games. Now, speaking of, if you love to work in the games industry, here's some tips and tricks and some hard truths about how to do it. So I do lots of reviews for students on both their portfolios and resumes, and here's some consistent advice that seems to work for lots of people. The first is to make and actually release something for a portfolio. The second is to make friends and be lovely to work with. And the third is to be persistent because there's not many roles in games, but we'll get to that in a second. So with the portfolio, Shipping is a skill, and by shipping, I mean releasing the game to a world. It's really important to understand that making a game is quite difficult, especially in the last 10%. We always joke that the last 10% of the game is actually 90% of the work. And by shipping and releasing a game to the world, you can show a potential employer or potential internship provider or for a work experience provider that, hey, I can stick around for the boring bits. I can do all the fundamental parts of making a game by myself. How about you give me a shot also? Shipping's extremely important. And by shipping, you don't even need to make the next Call of Duty. What you could do is just remake Pong and add a twist to it. It's really important to release something small. It's not a matter of whether the game's fun or not, but actually releasing games a whole important and separate skill itself. So it's really important to release something small. Think of an idea, cut it in half, and cut it in half again. As an example, one thing you have to be wary of is what's called scope creep. Now, scope creep is when you think of an idea for a game, and you keep adding bits and pieces to it, and before you realize the game has blown out of scope into something completely different. As an example, if you wanted to make a game about being a dinosaur, maybe you're a T-Rex. What could you do in this game? You could run around, you could eat other dinosaurs, you could run away from bigger dinosaurs, you could walk and jump and run, and that's pretty cool. And then you start thinking, well, what else could you do? Maybe you could be a flying dinosaur, and maybe you can start evolving into evolution. And then before you know it, you're thinking about what if the dinosaurs have laser beams attached to them? You could have humans riding these dinosaurs also, and you just keep going and going and going. And what you ended up doing is making a game that you'll never finish, that may not even be fun, that has lots of disparate pieces. And it's really important not to get into this habit of scope creeping, so think of an idea, cut it in half, and in half again. I think for your first game to prove to, for example, to get work experience or an internship, the first thing I would do is make a game such as Pong and add a twist to it. Something small, because before you know it, it'll take longer than you think. I know this firsthand. The very first game that I made was called Smog Game. It was a color matching endless runner that you would teach kids about saving the environment by blowing up smog producing power plants. Now this game literally only had two buttons, a red button and a blue button. A red button to fire the red bullets, a blue button to fire the blue bullets to blow up the smog producing power plants. Now, this is such a simple game, we thought it would take us a couple weeks. It took us 8 months to finally make the game and put it on the App Store. So everything you do will take longer than you think. So think of an idea, cut it in half and then half again, and put it somewhere where people can go and play it. It'll really show and be a really great piece for your portfolio for potential employers. Now, speaking of networking, I want to talk about making friends in the industry. And end of the day, it's always about who you know, what you know, as the old adage goes. Now, I really hate the terminology of networking, which I think is a very stale term, where people go, go meet some people so you can get a job that way. It's not how it works. The industry is so small that what you really want to do is make genuine friends, and then maybe down the track you could help each other out. For example, if you ever talk to someone who goes to a conference and goes, I gave out all 500 business cards. Well, you got to think, do they even have enough time to talk to 500 people and have meaningful conversations that they will remember? Probably not. As an example, back in GCAP in 2013, I met a now friend of mine, Sam Itzo. Sam and I had a great chat. We had a really, really great chat for over a couple of days at the conference. And then we left it there. And we kept, sort of catching up over the years. Funnily enough, Sam and I would later become co-workers 10 years later on Call of Duty. It's really important to understand that this was, again, 10 years in the making. This was not someone I met to try and get a job straight away. Or in this case, I actually interviewed Sam to work on Call of Duty a couple of years ago. Again, it takes time. So make genuine friends. Don't just make friends for the sake of hoping to get something out of them. That's not the way you make friends. It's not the way you network. Now, lastly, it's important to be persistent. It is not an overnight thing to get a job in the games industry. It does take time. So, for a snapshot for the Australian game development industry this year, in 2022, 2020 to 2021, the number of employees is around 1,400 people, and next year we're in a growth period in the industry. Next year, 400 more people will likely be hired. Now, if you think about it, there's actually not that many people. It's only 2,000 people. I mean, think about it again. There's only 2,000 people working in the game development industry. There's over 2,000 graduates in game development alone in Australia. So there's a lot more people who want to get into games than there are jobs available. And that's not including degrees such as computer science, which are not strictly game related either. Now, in terms of who works in games in Australia, almost a third of them are programmers, and the rest breaks down to artists, marketing, designers, producers, and so on and so forth. So if you do love coding and you do want to make games, maybe that's the best path into the games industry as well. Followed closely by being an artist. Now, everything I've said today is advice from my perspective. Your journey will be different. The path that you forge will have twists and turns and good days and bad days. The thing is, it won't be overnight. That's the thing I can guarantee. My career so far has been 10 years in the making, and a lot of hard work and supportive people behind it. So take your time, take a deep breath. If you want to get in the industry, take your time. You'll get there eventually. Thank you so much for listening to me here today. My name is Josh Caratelli, and I hope you've enjoyed and learned something today. Thank you.